spoke one-on-one with President Trump about this virus pandemic and his administration's response to it. Also about what comes next and when you are the proper way to
Excuse me. Now that I have your attention, woo-hoo! All praises, glory be to the Most High, and let's make history. And class is in session.
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, now and go. Hello, everybody. My name is HisStory Williams, and this is the Making History Making podcast. I am excited. This amazing person, Mr. Jeff, inside the building with me. Well, inside his building, which is out on the Lakeshore, which is an organization that helps the people who are part of the LGBTQ plus community itself. Or should I add some more to the IA? Is it that? Correct me on that. I'm learning.
We typically, out on the Lakeshore, we go with LGBTQ plus. So as a general rule, everything we put out, everything we say is LGBTQ plus.
Yes. See, I've heard differently. So I've heard LGBTQ. That's what people stop at. Or I see LGBTQ plus. Or I see LGBTQIA.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different versions of it.
Yes.
And because of that, that's why as a board, our organization said, it's LGBTQ plus, and that's just how we do it.
Awesome. So, what is specifically the Out on the Lakeshore organization itself?
Yeah, so we are a LGBTQ plus community center. We also act as a resource for the community. We provide resources to connect LGBTQ plus people and allies to whether it's therapists, doctors, and other physicians, even affirming like hair salons and stuff like that. You know, we act as kind of a connecting resource for those kinds of things. We also often have people just come in for just to hang out in a safe space. And we provide programming for them to do so as well, like game nights. We've had a middle school night, high school night, and we work with the different schools in the area, especially with the Gay Straight Alliance organizations within the schools. Okay. So we go in and we help them facilitate what those organizations are doing, and we work with those groups to, help facilitate their events and their meetings, and we put on special events for those groups as well. Like we've gone to BAM where we pay for all the kids to go bowling, and buy them pizza and pop. So it's just a safe space in the community where we're hosting an event for them, and it's for kind of all LGBTQ plus people that are younger and maybe don't have as many resources to be able to hang out with their friends that are part of the LGBTQ plus community. But then it's also, we're paying for it, so they don't have to worry about how am I going to pay for going bowling and something like that.
Gotcha. So it's definitely a community and network for people who are part of this community, or maybe even outside of this community itself and have friends within, or trying to get to know for people within. So, and you guys do a lot of fundraising? Because you say we pay for it a lot. So you must be doing a lot of fundraising and like trying to get some funding so you could be able to do such a thing.
Yeah, so the other big thing that we do is we are the host of the Holland Pride Celebration. Mm-hmm. So the Pride Celebration's been going on since 2013, even before Out on the Lakeshore existed. And essentially it grew to the point where, you know, an organization needed to really own that event. So that was part of the reason why Out on the Lakeshore was created. Okay. So Out on the Lakeshore was kind of formed, and of course it wouldn't make sense to have just an organization that's created just to host Pride. So that's why a community center was also created so that we can provide programming and events and, you know, resources year round. We also are the only brick and mortar LGBTQ resource center in the Holland area. Okay. So we also kind of act as a resource for other organizations like PFLAG of Holland Lakeshore and Gender Safe, both of which work with families and LGBTQ plus people as another type of resource. Okay. But they don't have their own space, so they often come and use our space for their programming and events.
Okay. So this question just sparked up to me because I've never heard of PFLAG or Gender Safe. What are those specific, if you could possibly give me like an information on that? Yeah. Because I'd never heard of those as well. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one though.
Definitely. So PFLAG is actually a national organization, okay. But there's a local Holland Lakeshore chapter. Okay. And PFLAG stands for the Parents and Friends of Lesbian and Gay.
Okay.
So that kind of sums it up a little bit. Yeah. They, of course, encompass more than that now. The organization has existed for many, many years, so their name doesn't necessarily encompass everything that they currently actually do, but they are essentially a resource, especially for families. Okay. Whether, you know, it's maybe it's the parents are LGBT, or maybe they have kids that are part of the community, you know, whatever that looks like, they are a group for that. Gender Safe kind of sparked from PFLAG. Gender Safe is a local organization, and they specifically are a organization that is support for the trans community.
Okay. That's super dope. Because I found you guys by accident. Well, technically both times I found you by accident. So I'm gonna be honest, I do DoorDash and Uber Eats, so I pass up Black River a lot, and I seen this and I was like, oh shoot, I didn't even know that they had like an organization out here for that.
Honestly, a lot of people find us that way, you know, whether it's the students coming from the school or parents driving by, they see our pride flag and our trans flag out
and
front.
That's what caught my eye. I was like, oh, they got their flags out there. That's dope.
Yeah. And what I'll say on that is when the flags are out, everyone's welcome.
Awesome.
That's kind of what our policy is, you know, if we're here, whether or not it's our regular open hours time, if we're here and we put the flags out, that means that this space is open and anyone who needs it is welcome, and it is a safe space at that time.
Okay. That's dope. That's seriously dope. Yeah, that is dope. I had a friend, and I think I told you the same thing. They work out in Muskegon as a social worker, and they went on Facebook and they said, hey, like, what's the name of the Holland organization that helps people who are from the LGBTQ community? And somebody randomly just wrote your name, and I was like, oh shit, I know that organization. I just knew that. So I had an interview, and me as a person, and like I kind of explained to you earlier, I'm pansexual, and it just took me years to be able to accept such a thing, right? And one of those things is kind of growing up, like saying, like, having family who believed that it was homophobic, certain family members and stuff like that. Those people who were very impressionable on me. And so for me now to be able to sit there and admit that now, like, I met people who were part of GVSUs, like LGBTQ organizations and GRCCs as well. I had a supportive like wife and doctors and stuff like that helped me with that. So I'm glad that you guys sound like you kind of hit the ground running with helping people when it comes to saying that this is part of your community. You got to kind of accept this as what it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're not a large organization. We're only a little over 3 years old. And like I said, the Pride Festival is really what sparked Out on the Lakeshore coming to existence. You know, the festival itself was growing to the point where it needed an organization to really own it. So that kind of sparked Out on the Lakeshore starting. And once Out on the Lakeshore started, it went for about 3 years where even my position as director didn't exist. But it's in the last, I'd say, year been growing tremendously. You know, more people coming to our events and programming, much more visibility out in the community. And even in my time in the last about 6 months that I've been here as the director, we've seen so much more growth and visibility, people coming to us for things versus us trying to reach out to the community. So, well, it's taken about 3 years for that to happen. It's definitely, at this point, we really are just running with it.
Gotcha. So you kind of answered my question, my next question I was going to ask, which essentially I was going to ask, like, how has it been? Because you got the Pride parade itself, and then also you have people coming to you. One of the things I want that jumps out to my mind is when you talked about the Pride parade itself, is that they just built a new like convention center that was in downtown Holland, and they had the drag brunch.
So the Civic Center.
Civic Center. Sorry, not the convention center. Civic Center, and when that was built up, one of the first events that happened was the drag brunch. Yes. And the mayor came out saying that she doesn't think that should happen. And a lot of people were kind of saying that they didn't want that event to happen here in Holland. Has that affected you guys, like that kind of like energy that people don't want you here?
Well, we hear some of that. I would say that the energy on the other side of things, you know, kind of the counter argument to the negative, you know, comments and stuff that we hear, that just sparks all of the supporters to then raise their own voice. So one of the things that the mayor had said at that time, or the former mayor, she basically said that they don't have control over what organizations are using the space, that kind of thing. But she also said that once the event happens and if it's not successful, that's when they'd be able to say, well, it wasn't a successful event, so we don't want to host it again. Well, the show is sold out every time that it's been in Holland. Yes. They just had their third show in Holland recently, and again, it was sold out.
Yes.
So, I mean, I would say, if anything, her comments and some of the other comments from the community only prompted other people to purchase tickets and to help spread word that that event was even happening. So, if anything, the negative comments only sparked the positive comments.
That's super dope way to look at it. One of my things is that I've looked at was now in media. So with my master's, I studied more so on how digital media, online digital media, hands down, affects culture. And so one of the things that's kind of been making waves is Pose. Pose has definitely been kind of like doing a little bit better by opening up the door to make normalizing that these people are trans, or these people are just doing drag or gay or whatever like that. These people are part of this community and actually making it more open. So that's why I was asking that question. Has it just been more so like still negative feedback? Because it seems like more and more media is saying that, normalizing that these people are part of my community. And you seem like you're advocating that we are a part of your community, and we have to make that change and difference.
Yeah, I'd say times are definitely changing. Well, at one point it wasn't normal. It is now. And even in Holland, you know, this area is considered to be very conservative, very Dutch. But times are changing.
Yes.
You know, the views of the people in this area as a whole, you know, more people are on board with, you know, accepting everyone. Even the most recent mayoral election. Holland voted in a mayor who part of his campaign focused on LGBTQ rights and, you know, diversity and inclusion. The fact that the community voted for him as mayor shows that that's what the community wants as well.
True. That is very true. Now, with that, I've dug onto like Holland itself. Like, so what about you? Like, what makes you kind of so hungry for, or I guess passionate about an organization like this?
Yeah, so, I mean, I grew up in a very small town in the Upper Peninsula. I was surrounded by a similar area that, you know, like Holland, was very conservative, not very diverse, you know, and not just with like sexuality and orientation, but, you know, race and religion. You know, it was pretty much everyone's roughly the same. So then when I was in high school, I came out my junior year of high school, and I had known for several years before that. But I came out as gay my junior year of high school. And when I came out, I was actually the only out LGBTQ person in the entire school at the time. Several others came out after that, but when I came out, I was the only one. And there was no resource.
Oh man, you're pioneering.
Yeah, there was no resource. There was not really anywhere for me to go for help. Northern Michigan University was only about half an hour away from where I grew up, but even they didn't really have much of a resource for anyone outside of the university. You know, they were about the only thing I had that was anywhere nearby, but they didn't really have anything to cater to, you know, high school students, that kind of thing. But then, I mean, my coming out process really was pretty easy. You know, I did not have it as bad as many others did. And even many others that came out between me coming out and me graduating. Several other students came out as gay or lesbian or bisexual in that, you know, year and a half until I graduated. And some of them didn't have a very good situation like I did. So I kind of became the resource for a few of them. Not that I really knew what I was doing, but I was a support system and kind of a connection to finding other resources for them. So that kind of started my, you know, passion for just helping people. And I guess for helping people specifically revolving around those issues. So, you know, flash forward, when I was in college, I have a degree in advertising and public relations from Grand Valley. And essentially I wanted to work in nonprofit with that PR perspective. And then that kind of revolved into, you know, I worked at a casino for 5 years doing their media relations and community involvement and all of that kind of stuff. So I was working with a lot of nonprofits, but it wasn't exactly really what I wanted to be doing. So when I left the casino and I was looking for a nonprofit role, when Out on the Lakeshore's position was posted, and I realized not only is it the first person that, or, you know, the first director that they're hiring, it was also that weird kind of balance of, I didn't really have a whole lot of nonprofit background, but I had a lot of marketing background. And well, out on the Lakeshore really needed someone to lead the entire organization. What they really needed wasn't someone with the strong nonprofit background. The little bit I had was enough, but they really needed that marketing and PR background, which I had. So it was kind of a great fit where being a part of this organization is helping me learn more on the nonprofit side, but I'm helping the organization from that marketing perspective, which is at the time what we really needed because we're growing and growing fast. And marketing is essential to that.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's a lot of positions, me doing media, I definitely will say that, is that surprisingly enough, you have these roles that kind of, even though they're looking for like a manager or a director, they kind of need a PR person to run it. And it seemed like definitely in this case, you definitely need a PR person, a person who can kind of like say that or change the narrative for like what is considered LGBTQ or stuff like that as well. And that's why I kind of was saying like the way that media is kind of portraying it, it's like definitely we're in the community, but we don't have to be like your flamboyant version of Tu Wong Fu. We're not that. We're definitely normal people.
We're normal people, and I mean, there's people on all ends of the spectrum, or all different types of people that, some of them are the more flamboyant, but even, there's people on all different levels, and I think what people don't realize is we aren't all the stereotype.
Yes.
And I think it's important just to understand that, the LGBTQ people in this area are your friends, your neighbors, your family members. Yes. And that's kind of the point that we're really trying to get across to people is, it's the people you pass on the street and the people that are at the next table from you when you're at the restaurant.
Yes.
All the way down to, you may not know it, but it could be the people that are sitting at the table with you.
Yes. Or unfortunately, it can be your parents or your family members, and they just haven't talked about it. I know me being as part of the Black community, I've seen several times where they had situations where people just never came out about it, and they just kind of just stuck with their spouses, even though like they were this way. I think it was 50 Cent, his mom talked about it. Like she had all these kids with these different men, but really on the inside, she was lesbian the whole time, but she didn't want the stereotype or the stigma to be held on against her. And the same thing when certain African cultures as well, you're hearing about it, like these kids who, even though they were being raped by these people, they were also being killed just because of the fact of their orientation, I guess you would say, the preference, I'm sorry. So it's kind of, I don't know. That's a very, very sticky way of saying that. I like how you said earlier. This is a very loaded way of thinking and also processing.
Well, and there's definitely, kind of in those sorts of situations, you have kind of intersecting, identities.
Yes.
And there are identities that aren't always as quick to be accepted, whether it's a different race, you're not white. And that's unfortunately what happens in the more conservative areas, especially, is if you're not white, you're probably going to experience some kind of bias situations. And then you add in, a differing sexuality or identity, like gender identity.
Yes.
And it just makes it that much harder and worse for people to understand, but also for that particular individual to accept themselves and really be comfortable being open about who they are.
Awesome. Now, this is a dope conversation. I apologize. So I'm probably going to go a little bit over. So you do like you were telling me earlier, you do the Grand Rapids professionals, young professionals organization as well. Grand Rapids seems like it's kind of becoming slowly turning over to like the youth, the younger people, more art, more music, more liberal arts is coming out of it. Perspectives is coming out over there. So how is your experience in Grand Rapids versus a Holland area, or even like your hometown itself?
Yeah, so I'd say Grand Rapids, which I currently live in the Grand Rapids area, and then I commute to Holland. So I'm very kind of intertwined into both communities. Grand Rapids, I would say, is a little bit more ahead of the game.
Yes.
Whereas I think Holland it's getting there, but it's a little bit more kind of, yeah, it's kind of following the movement more than it's really leading it, whereas Grand Rapids is leading the movement, you know, to be more inclusive in all different areas, not even just sexuality and orientation, but, you know, all kinds of diversity and inclusion. You know, recognizing, like you were mentioning, the younger people coming up are really, they're the new leaders. And kind of recognizing that there's different perspectives coming in. Whereas Holland still is a little bit more of kind of that, like, older crowd is still kind of leading things, and the younger crowd, the younger crowd has moved away. So it's trying to become more inclusive, to get more younger people to not only stay here, you know, not, you know, graduate from school and move away right away, but also to get others to come back. You know, there's tons of people, especially, you know, in my work with the LGBTQ community, we recognize that there's a lot of people who leave, you know, once they become an adult because they don't feel comfortable in the area. They don't feel that they're going to be able to be who they are at work or, you know, around their family even. So they move away. And I think Holland, and kind of turning a new leaf and starting to become more and more inclusive, will help to keep some of those people here. Maybe it'll get some new people to come in, and maybe it'll also get some of the people who have already moved away to come back. Which,
yeah, that would be dope if it did it. At one point in time, they had during the best example that I can use is during the election, the year that Donald Trump was inaugurated, which was 2017 technically. So they had Donald Trump was talking about, like, the immigration. I know this is kind of like out of your realm when it comes to maybe out of this, but GR was looked at as a sanctuary city for those people, and you had these people who were protesting against that policy. I don't know if you remember, they had the sanctuary city, like, protests and, like, the big old marches and stuff like that, downtown Grand Rapids. And at one point in time, I took offense to it, not because of the fact that they were doing it, but because of the fact that I noticed that there was this huge, excuse my French when I say this, but, or like the way I say this, but it is a whole fuck ton of white folks who are arguing for issues that I'm like, as a black person and also as a recently open person who's pan, I'm looking at it like, y'all fuckers don't know this lifestyle. I don't understand why you're speaking up for me when I just need an ally, or I need somebody to tell me, to push me to do that, to speak up for myself and stand up for myself. So I guess my next thing is to say that to you is, like, what do you say to a person who is straight and are not considered part of this community, who is trying to speak up for somebody in this, in this community itself? Because you look at Holland is either they notoriously in the closet or they're considered straight. How do you feel about those people who are straight and are trying to speak up for something that is technically your issue?
Yeah, so
I'm sorry for giving that a loaded way. I mean, a mouthful of words, of way of saying that. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. So I think that allies are very important, and there's definitely a place for allies to speak. And it's necessary. You know, if it's only the LGBTQ community speaking, there's plenty of people that just aren't going to listen. But when you have allies speaking who, especially revolving around LGBTQ issues, if it's leaders of different faith organizations that are also allies, that's a huge voice that if only the LGBTQ community is speaking, you're not going to get that voice. And in the Holland area, that is an essential voice, because religious freedom is always a, hot topic in this area.
True.
So that's very important. And I mean, there's also business leaders who maybe they aren't LGBTQ, but their employers or employees are. And so all of those different voices are very important. But to your point, you do also need to have the voices of the actual community. Not to say I think that, it's bad for allies to speak. I think those voices are just as important.
Yeah.
But we also need to encourage the actual community to speak for themselves and give their own personal experiences. Right now we're working on Holland's non-discrimination ordinance. Currently, it does not include sexual orientation or gender identity.
I didn't know that.
And so we're working on it. I am one of 3 people kind of leading that movement. And we're working on getting the city to amend that ordinance to include it. It currently only covers housing discrimination. So even the current ordinance, there's a list of protected classes, but they're not protected under employment through the city of Holland. At the state and federal level, they're protected, but Holland does not currently recognize those protections. So we're also working on hopefully getting the ordinance amended to include employment as well of all protected classes, not just sexual orientation and gender identity, but all protected.
Yeah, and you'll have people who sit there and say, again, I hear from the Black community in that way, is that when it's LGBTQ issues, they always pass those, but they never talk about race itself. So I'm glad that you're trying to make sure that it shows inclusive, because I think a lot of people forget that just because of the fact that it's an LGBTQ issue doesn't mean that it's not a race issue neither. So,
right. Like I said, there's always those intersecting identities.
Yes.
And you're going to get that with all different types of identities. So it's important to us to keep that in mind, especially as we're talking about, adding the employment side of the discrimination ordinance. That's not just for the LGBTQ community. That's for all protected classes, race being one of them, age and, income, and, all of the different protected classes that we already have, but then including the sexual orientation and gender identity that we're trying to just get added as a whole to all of the non-discrimination ordinances for Holland.
Now, quick question. I just thought of it because you said about the protected class. Maybe this will go over your head a little bit too, is hair. Hair has been kind of a hot topic. So they got 5 states that have approved it, where businesses cannot discriminate you based off of your hair. Is that going to be something that you're going to include in that protected class as well?
So that's not something that we're necessarily looking at, because our focus, of course, is the sexual orientation and gender identity, and just getting that included in the current ordinance, but then also having the ordinance cover employment. So when it comes to other classes or things that could be protected, it's kind of out of our realm.
Right.
Because we focus, of course, on LGBTQ issues. But I think it's being done in a way that's strategic and smart, so that if in the future, maybe a ethnic diversity organization would want to get more of hair included into it, or, appearances, those kinds of things, then hopefully, it'd be easier for that to happen versus the big long process we're going through right now to amend it. And I think even stuff like that could be currently open to interpretation anyway. Maybe it needs to be defined better, but when it comes to hair, if it's their hair is, in line with their race, then I would hope that it would be ruled as, covered under racial discrimination.
Well, some people have been using it as that. I know that you had the situation like in Houston, Texas, where the teenage boy who had to cut his hair, they was trying to make him cut his hair before he go to graduation and so on. And I just was curious about that because that's kind of like that it falls into that realm. You have this community of people and you do have white folks who
like I said, we are a connecting resource. That's one of the primary purposes of Out on the Lakeshore is we connect people to whatever resources they need.
Making sure that you have
one of those resources that a lot of people don't think about is hair salons that are affirming of trans people or even
so that's why I was kind of curious.
LGBT people,
piggybacking off of questions and stuff, statements that you made earlier.
A little bit more necessary to have a salon they can go to where it doesn't matter, what they were born as. It matters who they are now and maybe it's who they want to present themselves as and need to. And not all hair salons and, stylists are going to be okay with having trans people as clients. So we try to, make sure that when it comes to someone who just wants to know where they can go get their hair styled, we have a list of places they can go.
In a weird way, you're green booking it. So you're just kind of giving a list of places that these people can go so that they won't feel that discrimination and they don't want to feel that.
It's places we've talked to and we know that they are accepting and affirming of all types of people.
Okay. Now, we talked about so many things that's changing. That is changing. What do you see that we need to do the biggest work to help an organization like Out on the Lakeshore to be better or be more efficient? Proficient, I guess you would say.
I guess the biggest thing is, we're just always looking for just the community support and helping to promote what we're doing. We're doing a lot of different things and we've got programming all the time, monthly adult pride nights at different bars and middle school and high school nights out on the Lakeshore where we do sometimes it'll be a game night or a movie night, whatever it is, it kind of rotates and changes every month. But, those different events that we really need to get the word out on. And because a lot of it's relatively new, it's hard to do so. So the biggest thing that we need is help getting the word out that these things are happening and that we are a safe space for people of all ages. So, we have programs for everyone as young as middle schoolers all the way up. And then occasionally we have, more family-oriented events too. So that kind of covers even younger than middle schoolers if they're, coming with their family. So I think it's just important for us that we kind of have that assistance in spreading the word about things that we have going on. And, if it's parents of LGBTQ people, asking their kids if they want to go to our middle school night or our high school night, because the kids probably aren't going to hear about it quite as quickly because their parents are the ones that are getting more of the communication. The kids might be a little too young to even be on social media actively, or maybe they're not on the same social media we're on and that kind of thing. So it's kind of the parents, making sure their kids know about it. And it's, just a combination of come to our events and invite your friends and that kind of thing.
Okay. Now, before we go in and kind of close out, what are some places that you want to shout out that's like, you say safe spaces for people who are part of this community, because you said hair salons, but and you talked about some churches as well. What are some of those churches and hair salons that you can think of that would be those safe spaces? Yeah,
so the one hair salon that I think of right away is actually literally right next door to Out on the Lakeshore. It's called Imagery. They are the first one on our list, and I've referred multiple people over to them. They're accepting of everyone and definitely are a great place to go if that is something that you need. And I would say everything from if it's because of your sexual orientation or gender identity or even racial identity, they are accepting and, a great place to go. For churches, one of the ones that we work the most with, and there's several churches, but the one that we work the closest with is Grace Episcopal, which is right in Holland, and they host PFLAG and Gender Safe every month. So we also host Gender Safe once a month, but Grace Episcopal hosts their monthly meetings kind of on the off part of the month, and they are very involved and open to hosting our events if we need a space bigger than our community center. They've been a huge support for us since before Out on the Lakeshore even existed. So those are some great ones. I also definitely give a shout out. It's not necessarily the same type of, it's not like a business to go to for a safe space, but another huge shout out that I think is absolutely warranted is Herman Miller. They are our biggest supporter. They have been for several years.
Man, Herman Miller has been trying to change the world in Holland.
Definitely. So they are the biggest sponsor of our Pride celebration. If you look around the room in our community center, most of the furniture here is Herman Miller, because when we were trying to furnish this place, they donated a lot of our furniture.
Oh, no.
And they're one of the organizations I talk to probably the most consistently because they want to make sure that we're succeeding. So it might not even be financial or, the cost of the furniture. It's also them reaching out like, how else can we help you? I speak to they've got an LGBTQ internal resource team. So they've got their IRTs for, multiple different areas, but one of them is an LGBTQ resource team. And so I speak to them regularly, and they want to make sure that we're succeeding and that if there's anything they can do to help us, and it might even be as simple as if we've got something big going on, they can pass it on to their team members. But that's a great organization in the area. They are supportive of all different gender identities and sexual orientations for their own team members. So whether it's, people looking for a job and want a safe space to work, I would recommend Herman Miller as a great option. But even just, they support us, so why not support them when you're looking for furniture, that kind of thing. So definitely gotta give a shout out to them because they are honestly one of the main reasons why Out on the Lakeshore has been successful, because without their support, it would be hard to put on the Pride Festival every year. And that festival ultimately supports most of what happens throughout the year at Out on the Lakeshore. So if we couldn't put the festival on because we don't have their, premier sponsorship, it would be so difficult to raise those funds elsewhere to then run, our programming that we have throughout the year.
That's super dope. With that being said, on Mondays, Herman Miller actually does do open interviews for manufacturing. So keep that in mind too. If you are in the Holland or West Michigan area, go to the Zeeland Herman Miller location. They actually do open interviews for those days. So just because Jeff actually talked about that, I just wanted to make sure I had that out there too. And my last two questions. Well, three questions technically. So first off, what do you recommend a person who is a baby Jeff somewhere that's in like Paris, Michigan or like Opelousas, Louisiana or something like that? How do you recommend, or what would you tell them if they were in your situation, or if they were in like some of your friends' situation right now? Like, what would you tell them about like organizations like this, or even just like how to look towards the future?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is it's important to try to find resources, and not everywhere has resources. And as unfortunate as it is, it's the truth. You know, not everywhere has a resource. Even, you know, like I said, I'm from the UP, and there's not a lot of resources for LGBT people. And I mean, when I was there, it was, well, I left there about 11 years ago, and it's not necessarily a whole lot better than it was then, and they don't really have much for resources to this day. So unfortunately, not everywhere has strong resources, but there are national resources that it might not be physical that you can go there, but if your area doesn't have resources, there are, you know, Michigan has Equality Michigan. That is a great resource. They're more on the legal side of things, but they're a statewide organization that is all about making sure, you know, everyone's treated equally. I've mentioned PFLAG. There are chapters throughout the country that maybe they're not right in your area, but maybe there's one close enough that you can at least get connected to them. Or if not, maybe you can connect to the national PFLAG organization. And even things like, you know, talking to the local universities. Most universities nowadays have some kind of resource.
Yes.
And while not all of them are really a resource for the community, some of them might have something that they can provide, or they might be connected with other resources that maybe you don't know exist in your area. And there's plenty of other organizations that maybe they're not LGBTQ specific, but they're supportive and willing to help however they can, or maybe they know of other resources in your area. So I think it's just important to kind of do your research and find what those different support systems might be. And depending on what your need is, you know, maybe that support system is literally just a friend.
Yep.
You know, you don't have to have an organization that's helping you out. Some people do. But like in my situation, I didn't need an organization. And honestly, if there was an organization like out on the Lakeshore in my area, would I have used it? Probably not. But because I kind of became that resource for my friends in the school, that's kind of what made me passionate about it. So even though I never would have used it as a kid growing up, you know, just coming out, it is necessary for some people, and not everyone has a good situation like I did. So it's finding those resources, and if you need them, using them. And then I would add on to that for people that are not LGBTQ, but they want to be effective allies,
Yeah.
make it known
Make it known
that you are an ally and that you're supportive. I would encourage people not to necessarily give themselves the title of ally.
And why is that? I'm so sorry. Before we go,
Oh, no, you're good. I get that question all the time, but essentially what I typically get, as kind of a feedback when someone calls themselves an ally is that you can't really give yourself that label, because it's not really a title. It's more of an action.
Yes.
It's more allyship, not I'm an ally. Meaning you can't just say you're an ally and that's it. To be an ally, you have to act on it. You have to, promote inclusion and, really be kind of like an active resource.
Yes.
I think initially when, the term ally kind of first started, yeah, you could call yourself an ally and that was great. But it's kind of gotten to the point where people like to call themselves an ally just because they're accepting.
Yes.
And I mean, those people are great, and maybe that's their purpose, is they're just accepting and that's it.
And it's easy to be, and there's a difference between even accepting and being tolerant. And you can still consider yourself an ally.
So I think that's why more recently there's been some kind of negative kickback from a lot of the LGBTQ community when too many people are quick to say that they're an ally, but are they really doing anything? And not to say that those people aren't great, and it's great that they're supportive in some way, but maybe not quite to the point where they should really be labeled an ally.
Yeah. I think that's even one of those things that was really one of my toughest things, like I said, going into that situation. Like, those countries were not necessarily fitting my demographic correct when it comes to like the whole Donald Trump like ban and travel ban and stuff like that. Yeah. My wife is Hispanic though, and when I seen these people marching, it reminded me of the same people, because I don't know if you know, like they do the Martin Luther King march every year at Grand Valley, but then it's only for like a half a mile and then they stop. Whereas Martin Luther King marched 20, 30 miles to Selma. And, I'm not saying march all the way through Grand Rapids like that, but what I was just saying is that like your actions got to go beyond just the quick march. It has to be
more than the bare minimum.
Yes, and so that's one of the questions, and I felt really bad that day. I did make a girl cry because I was like, what makes you think that you can just do this for my protest? What makes you say that you can protest for me? And I asked a question. I said, and she travels. She's like well-versed. Like she goes to like Morocco and all the rest of these things. And that was one of the things that I ran into when I was at GVSU. I had these well-versed people who went all over these traveled abroad and stuff like that. Then you come back here and you're not implementing the things that you learned. You're cultured, right? And you're saying that, oh my gosh, they do this in Europe. You know what I mean? You have this experience. But Europe also has a specific type of democracy. Europe also has, for example, I don't know if you pay attention to the politics right now, they're fighting for Medicare, right? Well, they have national like health support over there in Europe and stuff like that. Why are you not fighting for those things? Because Medicare is not necessarily helping Black and brown people or people who are part of this community, the LGBTQ+. You need to fight for those things. Bring that culture here if you want to. Don't just talk about it. Just be about it. Like, do it. So that was one of the reasons why it's kind of always been hard for me to accept allies, because of the fact that I felt like there was no true allies in that way. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'm so sorry for going on my tangent on that one.
Oh, you're fine. Because I think it's an important point is that, I mean, allies are not just for the LGBTQ community. Yes, there's allies for various races and, all different types of identity.
Yes. Okay. So, got two more questions. One question is, if you had a chance to, do do you have anybody in your mind that like, kind of like the ALS challenge, you know how people used to say, hey, I challenge you to do this thing. Who would you challenge me to contact and be able to interview? My biggest thing, like I said again, is people who are independent artists, who are local business owners, local organizers like yourself. It's who would you think of in your head, like right now, that you think I should contact and be able to do an interview like this with?
So I guess my first thought is more the diversity and inclusion route, of course, because that's the work I do. So the first person I think of that I think would be great for you to be able to speak to kind of continue this conversation a little bit would be Robin Afric. Robin. Sorry. She is the director of diversity and inclusion for Ottawa County.
Okay.
She's been a great resource for me. She also has put on she's one of the main people that put on the Ottawa County Diversity Forum, which was an awesome event. I attended it back in the fall, and it really brought a lot of different people together to show things from the county level, from the Holland city level. Different leaders from Grand Rapids were there at the event for, you know, a panel and different speaking engagements. So it was a great event, and that only reflects, you know, the work that Robin is doing in the Ottawa County area. And she's definitely very passionate about what she does. She's the first ever director for diversity and inclusion for the county. So she's really paving the way for what kinds of things are happening at the county level. And she's got a wealth of knowledge that I think, to continue kind of our conversation and, you know, continue that type of topic, she would be a great person to talk to and maybe get a little bit more of the, you know, municipal kind of frame around LGBT issues and other diversity and inclusion issues in Ottawa County.
Awesome. Robin, you hear that? I'm coming for you. No joke. So Robin Afric, I definitely will make sure I get in contact with them. And then the last thing is, where can people find you?
So first of all, we are the only brick and mortar location for an LGBT resource in the Holland area. So we're at 451 Columbia Avenue. So we're kind of just south of the downtown Holland area. But then we also have a pretty strong presence on Facebook, both for Out on the Lakeshore, but we also have a separate Holland Pride Facebook page. So both of those are great places to find us and find out information about us. Website, of course, so just outonthelakeshore.org. And on there, you can also sign up for our monthly newsletter that explains all of the events that we have going on for that month.
Okay. Thank you. I really appreciated this, Mr. Jeff. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
My name is HisStory Williams. Please make sure you guys go out and support the Out on the Lakeshore organization in Holland, Michigan, and also support the Pride Center in Grand Rapids. Support your local organizations. That is a huge, big deal, I believe. And I think that actually can make social change. I grew up with the Boys and Girls Club, and surprisingly enough, voila, you got this person right here randomly. But with that being said, you are doing so many great things. I'm glad to say that you are making history, sir. I appreciate you for what you guys are doing here out in the Holland and the Lakeshore area as well.
Well, thank you.
Okay, guys, make sure you guys get wisen up on what's going on in your streets. My name is HisStory Williams, and I am here with Jeff at Out on the Lakeshore. Thanks a lot for listening. Woo-hoo! Look at you. You just went through a cultural experience and looking for more or simply just closure. Now, if you want to challenge me to interview someone you know that is making history, email me in the link in the description. Also, if you're looking for more of Making History, History Making podcasts, then remember, that you can find it on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Luminary, iHeartRadio, and more. You can also find more content by HisStory Williams on A Narrative Media Facebook page and YouTube. These pages includes events, tutorials, and even a gaming stream. Speaking of gaming, if you are a blurred, nerd, Latin nerd, or simply a gamer, you can check out Talk a Big Game on Twitch under HisStory W. That is capital H, lowercase I, lowercase s, capital S, TORY, capital W. Or the Facebook page, A Narrative Media. Also, don't forget to check out the merchandise in the links in the description. We have various types of merchandise to choose from and show your support for HisStory Williams and A&M. This includes bags and apparel on Redbubble, more colors for your t-shirts. You find those on TeePublic. Or if you're a coffee drinker, grab a bag of the biggest roast coffee from Custom Label Coffee. When you buy a bag of Custom Label Coffee, make sure you use the promo code SLOTHGAMING to get 10% off. Finally, for the closure, it would be cliche to say follow, like, subscribe, and share. But that is not completely why I am doing this. And that is not the brand that I want to build with A&M. I want to earn those things from you. My goal and dream is to provide you as the listener or viewer a cultural experience that is not only entertaining, but informative as well. My final goal is to make you feel as though you have a community every time you listen to this show. So when you hit that follow, subscribe, share, or like button, just know that you are part of other history makers and narrators that strive to grow and build a better connected future for all of us. So know that every time you hit those buttons, you're challenging yourself and me to keep making history. You folks stay awesome and keep making history so that you too will be on this podcast.